Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The time is just gone, 7:34 p.m. as we invite you this evening to a special broadcast. And this evening, we've got a panel discussion. We're talking about right-wing fascism and looking at two countries in particular. We're looking at Islamophobia in India and in France. And this evening, we've got quite a panel that we have assembled. Unfortunately, Dr. Vashna Jagannath has had to withdraw for some personal reasons, but we are going to be joined shortly by Dr. Tariq Ramadan, who is a Muslim academic, a philosopher, and a writer. We also have on the line joining us from the United Kingdom, Sister Ibtihal Basis, who is a barrister by profession, and we will also be joined shortly by Umar Sharif, who is a scholar of comparative religion from India. So we've got quite a panel that has assembled, and when one looks at what is taking place around the entire world and the right-wing movement having grown in leaps and bounds, particularly when one looks at governments right across the world, when one looks at Europe, looking at countries like Brazil and also India. Now, for far too long, we know of France, and France being a colonial power in Africa, absolutely brutal in its policies when it had colonized Africa, and it still continues colonizing Africa in other ways. But looking at Islamophobia in France, looking at the hijab ban, and over the years, we've seen so much basically happen in France. And recently, we've seen this open license that Emmanuel Macron has given to the people of France to do what they want to in terms of furthering the Islamophobic agenda. India, yes, looking at India, the BJP government, looking at the RSS, and the key issue here is what is this policy? This policy obviously is about stripping minority groups of state protection, and also looking at India when one looks at the citizenship bill as well, and leaving minorities vulnerable as a result of the laws that have been passed. So without much ado, we're going to go across now to the UK, firstly to be joined by Sister Ibtihal Basis. Sister Ibtihal, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you and your listeners and my co-panelists.
Well, Jazakallah to you for joining us this evening on this special broadcast and looking at the topic that obviously we have chosen this evening, looking at right-wing fascism and the ongoing Islamophobia in India and in France. Now, you've obviously lived in France for a while, for quite a long time, and you obviously have got a first-hand account as to what Islamophobia is and how Islamophobia has manifested itself in France for a long time now.
Yes. I mean, I moved to France in 2002 when I first got married. My husband was actually living there, so I moved there because he was there. And immediately I was struck by how racist, openly racist people were. Now, it may well be, and I was there actually when Jacques Chirac was president, and there was talk of removing the hijab, making it an illegal garment in schools, specifically in government buildings. So the world felt very, very tight for me as soon as I got there, having come from Britain, which was much more tolerant. Obviously, things they've been looking at France and thinking, okay, we want a bit more of what they're doing. And that's what we're now facing here in Britain as Muslims. It seems to be a global thing at the moment, but particularly accentuated in France, followed quite closely by Austria. So it's, yes, it's the first state where I was pushed and spat at when I was pregnant in a shopping area, in a very, quite a wealthy shopping area actually, by the Champs-Élysées. I know that Muslims there live in ghettos. There's a huge social divide between the French and the Muslims. It was the first place that I heard gunshots when I lived in a ghetto in Greny. Greny is a place where the Paris fires first took place in 2005. And I remember...
Can I just stop you there for a minute? I like to believe the other guests have joined us as well. So we'd like to welcome them to the show. Dr. Tariq Ramadan, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome, and Jazakallah to you as well for joining us on this panel discussion discussing Islamophobia in France and in India. And we also have got Brother Umar Sharif, who is a comparative religion scholar in India, joining us right now. Brother Umar Sharif, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
How are you? Sheikh Inayet, how are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, how are you keeping?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks a lot.
Right,
Nice
so
to
we've
see you
got
all.
our panel assembled this evening. Alhamdulillah, we've got Dr. Tariq Ramadan, Sister Ibtihal Basis as well, and Sheikh Omar Sharif. Sister Ibtihal, yes, if you'd like to just continue, from where, just sharing some of your experiences in France, and this is where we're going to lead or take this discussion to, inshallah.
Yes, I remember specifically when the hijab ban did come in, I was somewhat shocked by that. But I remember talking to some young girls, one of them in particular who was 16, who I say lived in Greny at that time. And she actually decided not to go for further education, even though the hijab was permitted at university. What Jacques Chirac actually implored her to do was look into where the hijab sits in Islam. And she decided to don it, wear it, and decided to then leave her education, saying that they've forced me into a choice. I'm speaking to young girls now at university, and they're thinking of now removing the hijab from university. Life is very, very difficult for Muslims. It's almost impossible, actually, I'd say, to bring up children, especially girls in France, with the ghettos that we see, with the growing Islamophobia. Now they're going to stop parents from taking children out of school, so there'll be no homeschooling. They're stopping mosques, or I know that in Greny, the community got together and raised €1 million in order to build their first mosque. I know that they've closed it down. It's only been open a year. So it's quite alarming, the rate of Islamophobia in France. But I do know that, places like Austria, certainly in Britain, people are looking over and thinking, yes, we could do with a little bit more of that. Well, Muslims are being forced into a different way of life. We're being forced to leave our deen effectively, to take off our hijabs, to accept a secular way of life, which we couldn't do. And they are not able to tolerate us, even though they say there's freedom of religion and freedom to express your religion in the way that you choose.
Yes, now I'd like to bring Professor Tariq Ramadan into the discussion as well. Now, obviously, Professor Tariq, and your experience as far as France is concerned as well, and it does appear that in Europe in particular, France seems to be taking the lead as far as Islamophobia is concerned, promoting Islamophobia, and also in terms of making minority groups like Muslims vulnerable by enacting laws. And also when one looks at what Emmanuel Macron has been doing in the last month or so as well, in terms of promoting Islamophobia in a massive way whatsoever.
Yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you for inviting me. And I think we have to be at the same time clear on what we are saying about what is happening in France, and clear and precise about and focus about what we are challenging here. Because as you know, France has the largest Muslim community in the West. In fact, if you look at the percentage, it's even more than the United States of America and all the European countries. We are talking about almost 6 to 7, if not more than that, because we don't have precise figures in France because of the secular system, the laïcité system. They don't know how many Muslims are there and Muslim citizens. Now, what is clear in this country is that there is a specific cultural background, which once again, we have to be clear. France had and still has a problem with religions, and not only Islam. It's a very long history of a battle with the Catholic Church and Jews in France and Protestants and Muslims today. So we need to get this into the context, because the problem that France has with religions, and especially if we speak about, for example, Charlie Hebdo, they are targeting all the religious communities, but it's clear that over the last 10 years, they are targeting Muslims more than others. And this also has to be taken into account. So this big picture, it's important when it comes to understand what is happening in France. Now, when we want to challenge the French culture, the French legal system, and to tackle the very meaning of Islamophobia in this country, we have to take into account three things. First is history and the colonial past. because the way they are talking about Muslims today is exactly the way they were talking about Muslims in Algeria, in Morocco, in Tunisia. And the perception was at that time, because you are a Muslim, you cannot be an equal citizen. So here is the problem. The problem is that yesterday we have a very scholarly orientated way of looking at Islam, and it was a scholarly oriented Islamophobia that we had in the books, that even if you speak Arabic, you're not able to be an equal citizen. You cannot be open-minded if you speak Arabic. The only way to be open-minded is to speak French, because Renan was saying when he was challenging Jamaluddin al-Afghani that French is the language of civilization and Arabic is, backward per se. So colonial past, it's important. The second is to look at the internal political dynamic, because Macron was not at all talking about Islam in the beginning when he came as a president. It's now because he has to face the coming election that there is no way, if he wants to win, that's the way. Target Muslims, speak about security, spread around fear, and this is the way for you to win the next election. So the political game here, it's important. The last thing, which I think would be completely wrong, is to essentialize the French society as they are essentializing Islam and Muslims. They are saying all the Muslims are like this. Islam is about this, and you are all about radicalization. We have to be quite clear that within the French society, you have a large segment of people who are as victims as us when it comes to political climate and when it comes to racism. And we have to be clear that these people, our fellow citizens in Europe, in France or elsewhere, are the objective allies to resist this racist statement and resist the populists. Because once again, if you look at what is happening in India, and we are going to talk about India, you know that within the Indian society, not all the Hindus, not all the Buddhists, not all the fellow Indian citizens are supporting the racist leading party. That's very important for us not to essentialize India and to essentialize France and saying, these are countries where Islamophobia is the very essence of the society, because this is not true.
Yes, Jazakallah for that, Professor Tariq, and we'd like to bring Sheikh Omar Sharif into the discussion now. Obviously, looking at India, and India boasting to be the world's largest democracy, and over the years, we've seen quite a bit happen since the BJP actually has come into power, but also aligned with the BJP. The other elements that are playing out, the likes of the RSS, and we know of the hateful ideology of the RSS, even inspired by what had taken place in Germany, in Nazi Germany as well. So when we look at all of that and put all of that into context and looking at where India is at this point in time, the BJP, its treatment of minorities, and when we're talking of minorities, not only Muslims, we're looking at Dalits, we're looking at Christians as well, and obviously trying to use legislation, to use the law of the land to enforce Islamophobia, or to, at the end of the day, to make sure that minorities are stripped of certain rights that they should be having.
Firstly, I must agree with Professor Tariq Ramadan when he said that Islamophobia is not the essential norm in France or even in India. So I must agree, because this notion of Islamophobia is present in India, but it is not too prevalent. It is not epidemic, or it is not something which you can say that it is seen everywhere. In fact, it is seen very rarely and occasionally. And whatever we come across in the media, it is true. We have to assert the fact that we get to see Islamophobia even in India, but it is very negligible. It's very negligible. Why would I say that? Because at this point in time, I'm staying in Tamil Nadu. It's a little far away from Bangalore city. I've come here for a vacation, and you come across people of all ethnicity background, all religious background, And we are united by the local culture here. The people here, the Hindus and the Muslims and people of various religious factions, we all speak a particular language which connects us together. People out here in Tamil Nadu, we speak Tamil as a language, and that bonds us. And apart from that, the kind of culture that we have with regards to the dressing and with regards to the cuisines and all of these things, it really, I mean, we cannot be separated. That's how we live. And on top of it, what we hear is the Islamophobia, which is present and which is artificially created, which is working to separate the communities. But it is a futile endeavor at this point in time, I must say, because India has been a place for the Muslims ever since the time of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He was deputed as a prophet, because the first masjid in India was built in 628 CE, very much during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself. I mean, at the time of his lifetime. So there are also narrations where we come across the time where Chairman Perumal, a Hindu king, he came to know about the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He traveled all the way to Makkah, Medina, and he met the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he died on his way back at a place near Yemen. So all of these things, we can find that in Kerala. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that the Hindus and the Muslims in India, we've been living together as neighbors within the same locality. We don't find much of ghettoization except with certain states. We might find that in certain states, but we have a very long history, 14 centuries of history, and we are very much mingled and very much mixed with the cultures of the local land, and it's very difficult to separate us. And of course, as you rightly put across, the RSS is an organization which works towards nationalization, which works towards bringing an idea of nationalization. But at the same time, what's happening here is they find Muslims and Islam to be something from outside. They find that these people would not cooperate with the idea of nationalization because they don't believe in any borders. They feel that at some point in time, we might shake hands with the Pakistanis or with the Bangladeshis and become a majority, and we might be a threat to their existence. That's what their mindset is. But over a period of time, I think when we start having a discourse and we try to engage in discussions, the majority of the people can understand that we are totally Indian as much as any Hindu can be. And that is it's an outcome of deliberated discussion. And that comes with scholarly, endeavor, which has to pass through certain forums. So therefore, I would say Islamophobia is a reality. It is there across the world, but it is negligible. And whatever efforts they're trying to do, it is an artificially insinuated effort. But its impact is felt very less on ground. Its impact is felt very less on ground. And by determination and by real courageous effort, I think we can win over this situation by just presenting what Islam is. And that's going to be very easy. I feel that.
Yes. Sister Ibtial, I'd like to bring you into the discussion, and having heard what both Professor Tariq Ramadan and Sheikh Omar Sharif have spoken about, talking about it being negligible. Now, that is obviously one aspect, but also when one looks at, in terms of people being threatened, or governments are being threatened by the existence of Islam. And we know over the years, we've seen the spread of Islam in countries like Europe, particularly in Europe and France, as Professor Tariq alluded to as well, the largest Muslim population in Europe. Do you think that, possibly there is some threat from an ideological perspective with the growth of Islam in France, for instance?
I think what's happening is that there's a very big political game going on, and I think Professor Tariq Ramadan has already touched upon it. At the time when Macron was first elected to be president, he actually stood up to Le Pen, who's a far right, who will no doubt stand against him in the next election, when she spoke out against Muslims and said that when she sees people praying outside, it's tantamount to Nazism. There are too many women that wear hijab now, and she will put a stop to that. and mosques should be banned. And he actually said to her, "You're causing civil war, and that is not the way that politicians should speak." What is he doing now? And it's quite clear that 10 million voted for her at the time, and he's a little bit concerned about that. Now, in a democracy, a politician in a democracy, if there is such a thing, a politician should be concerned about telling the truth. A politician should be concerned about his country. But it seems to me that, and everybody knows this, that politicians are more concerned about their political careers and positions. So he's becoming very unpopular, especially in the way that he's handled coronavirus, COVID. And he's looking at the Muslims and thinking, okay, well, this is fair game because we're a weak minority. No one really speaks up for us. He's closing every single organization down that does speak up for us. And I think there are two. He's closing down mosques. They rounded up and raided homes of innocent Muslims. And they said so themselves, because the foreign minister himself said, we're sending a clear message, which means that there's no evidence for rounding up these people. Why did he not do the same when there was an attack in a place called Avignon, not too far away, actually closer than Nice, to his presidential palace, when a man from a group called, I think, Generation Identity, which is a far-right group, went out in Avignon and wielded a knife an hour after the Nice attack? Why didn't he round up their members? Why wasn't there a media onslaught on this group? Why weren't they banned? Why weren't their leaders rounded up? Why weren't their houses raided? It's clear. And even if it's not absolutely true, which it is, I mean, I've just given some evidences of that, that the perception of by Muslims living in France is that they feel under siege. They feel that they're living a very separatist life. Now, we can say, look, not every French citizen is like that. That's true. Not every British citizen has a problem with Muslims. But when you wield that sort of information through one of the strongest, through the most powerful medium that you can, and that's the media itself, when you put up a caricature of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam on a government building, when you reel out and make everybody who is of the Muslim community responsible for the Nice attacks, what are you saying? And when most French people, I think it's about 90-something%, haven't even got a friend who is Muslim and don't know very much about Islam, what kind of conclusions are they going to reach? So the blame should lie squarely at the top, and that should lie with people like Macron, who are responsible for this, who still thinks that he's a colonialist. I mean, when they colonized Morocco and Tunisia, we know that in Morocco, Tunisia, the first language is not Arabic, it's French. They completely went in and took over and removed every aspect of our Islamic culture. And they intend to do that to us in France today. So there is a very real Islamophobia being wielded in France. And there is a very real Islamophobia. I can't comment on India. I don't know enough about it. But it would take a lot for French citizens to say, look, we want to look beyond what the media is telling us. It's very difficult for them to make that judgment. Most French people don't know what Islam is and what it propagates and have never picked up the Quran and read it or tried to understand. Why would they when they got the media telling them that, in Avignon, when they found out it wasn't a Muslim, they backed off. There was no reports from it. At first, all the media jumped on and said there was chants of Allahu Akbar. And they were hoping that it was another attack by another Muslim. So I think with all of these powers that be, when there is state power against a minority, it's very, very difficult for Muslims to ensure that their voice is being heard, and it clearly isn't being heard.
Well, Jazakallah for that, Professor Tariq, and obviously to bring you into the discussion and against what Sister Ibtihal has just mentioned. And we are talking about fascism. And I'd like your views. Can we describe France as a fascist state at this point in time?
No, I wouldn't go that way for many reasons, because fascism has a very specific definition, and you need to understand this historically and with the clear definition. What is happening now, and I think that all what Sister Ibtihal was saying is completely right. In fact, the way she's portraying the big picture of what is happening in France is correct. Now, the question is, you put all these events together, all these facts together, but this is a right picture, but I'm sorry to say this because I think that we have to be precise. It's a bit a distorted picture of the internal dynamics that you have within the French society. because it's not as black and white. It's more complex than this. Even though, if we have to speak about what is happening in France now, and it's the same. Once again, I wouldn't agree. I understand from where our Sheikh Omar is speaking, but I wouldn't agree with him saying, Islamophobia is negligible. It's not. It's serious. It's very serious. Now, what is right, I would say that what we see in many European countries and in India, in India and in so many other countries, that if you look at what is happening on the ground, if you look at the grassroots levels with our fellow citizens, is not as widespread as it is said to be. So you find fellow citizens, other people at the local level, much more ready to talk and to interact and to be proactive with their fellow Muslim citizens. What we have, and this is very dangerous, is at the level of the state and at the level of the elites, you have this Islamophobic discourse and this Islamophobic, so to speak, ideology spreading around. And the problem is that it's true that, in fact, 4 years ago, Macron won the election against the far-right populist party, Marine Le Pen. But in reality, the one who won maybe not the election, but won the battle, the ideological battle, by spreading around the populist ideology, the far-right ideology, making the Muslims the other, creating this sense of otherness for Muslims, creating a sense that we are the victims of their presence. And I always gave 4 features to define populism. First is the victim mentality. We are oppressed and we are attacked by these people coming to our country. So they are destroying our very identity. This is victimization. Second, very simple perception of the realities, us versus them. So it's us, the Indian, us, the French, against those people, the Muslims who are coming, and this binary vision of realities, us versus them. Very simple answer to very complex question. For example, very complex questions of unemployment, the reality of social injustice. Oh, it's all about them. So because they are coming, because they are foreigners, victim mentality, binary vision of the reality, simplistic answers, and plus nurturing a sense that at the end of the day, these Muslims are not people who belong to our society. So the whole features that we have here is something that we see in India. We see this even in the UK. We see this in France. So these features, I would say, we don't talk about fascism here. I would say we have to be very cautious and say, okay, look, populism is taking over. Far-right parties and the ideology and the very essence of this discourse, political discourse, is everywhere. And we need to know from where it's coming. It's coming from the elites, it's coming from the media, and it's coming from the state. Now, if you are a citizen and you are involved in this society, you should not fall into the trap of nurturing the victim mentality, saying it's us versus them, and to come with simplistic answer to a very complex reality. And we have to put things right, and being able to make it clear today that Islam is an Indian religion. It's a European religion. It's a French religion, and it's part of the society. So to be very assertive. So this is our discourse. It's not to play the victims in the whole discussion. It's to change completely. It's an intellectual revolution that we need to say, okay, we are at home and this is home. Who are our fellow citizens who are understanding pluralism in our society? So I'm much more interested in finding solutions to this ideological colonization that we have throughout the West now, making Islam the new enemy, making Muslims the new foreign citizens. Even if you are citizens in France, they make you feel that you are a foreign citizen. You are too much a Muslim to be a true French citizen. And you have exactly the same among some elites in India. in some elites in the state, in the states, even everywhere. So we need to get the sense of the political game here. And I would say, when they are essentializing Islam, we should not essentialize the West. That's the starting point of our discussion.
Yes. Now, Sheikh Umar, just looking at India, and obviously we're talking about fascism, and looking at India where it is at this point in time. And we've seen so much evolve over a period of time, the actions of the Indian government, the BJP government in particular, and we know what has happened as far as Kashmir is concerned, and also in terms of the citizenship laws. Now, obviously there is more to fascism than just citizenship laws. But also in terms of when one looks at fascist movements, they look at one-party rule, they look at control of the media, control over the courts, the military, the press, and also this cult-like following of a leader. Now, this obviously is very, very prevalent in India, particularly those who support the BJP government, the RSS, where people like Modi have got this cult-like following. Now, clearly that is bordering quite close to what fascism is all about.
Well, fascism, it would mean that, somebody finds that one group of people have more right than the others to live on a land. And that would be a thing of discrimination, an open discrimination. But here in India, we don't come across such kind of open discrimination in terms of making any legislations. Of course, there is an issue of the triple talaq, where we were having a lot of debate over why are they taking up this issue, why are they provoking the Muslims. But at the same time, if you look at triple talaq issue, it is an issue which has come to the fore because of some of the Muslims who were insisting that the triple talaq be banned. The triple talaq of instantly giving divorce at once by saying talaq, talaq, talaq was something which was not considered to be appropriate by the Muslims themselves. And a lot of Muslim women, they had gone to the Supreme Court to say that consider this to be banned. So therefore, there was a kind of deliberated effort by the Muslim community, although they were few in number. So if you look at the scenario across the world, the triple talaq is banned almost over more than 20 countries. But when it was brought out in India, it looked as a provocation. It looked as a thing that was going against Islam. But when the same thing was banned in over 20 countries across the world, it wasn't considered as a provocation. Like even if you say in Egypt or even in Pakistan, in various parts of the Middle East, the triple talaq of giving instant divorce is considered as impermissible in that society. So what is happening is, Muslims are also, sometimes they're getting alarmed. Whenever any issue is concerning the Islamic Sharia, if that is being touched upon by the government, there is a kind of alarm feeling which is happening within the Muslim mentality. So there is a two-way kind of thing which is happening. One is that there is deliberate provocation, and at the same time there is panic in the community at times. I would say both are not required in the society. There is a scope for debate. There is a scope for going to the process of law and order and the judicial process and trying to win over your rights through legal parameters. So there should be a kind of confidence within ourselves. Yes, what is right and what is wrong is wrong. Whoever says it. Sometimes it may be that your enemy might be speaking the truth at times. We have to acknowledge that. Sometimes you have to acknowledge that and move further. So that is a kind of, the development which is required in the community. Let me tell you how the perception is built. If you are looking at the media, you will come across that Muslim is being killed for transporting beef or possessing beef at home because some of the Hindus, they consider the cow to be sacred. But you know something? You come to India, even in Karnataka, various parts of Karnataka, you will still find beef is it's a staple food of the people of India. You will find it in Goa. You'll find it in Kerala. The Hindus eat beef. The Muslims eat beef. Even in Tamil Nadu, in Bangalore, elsewhere, you will find it. It is there. But the thing is, in the media, and if you come across in the parliament, the kind of discussion they talk about is that they want to ban beef. But India happens to be the second most exporters of beef in the world today after Brazil. So what are they talking? They are speaking one thing and they're doing another thing. They're talking about establishing something, but in reality, on ground, there is something else. So what is happening is that a perception is built through the media, through the mainstream media. And the mainstream media wants to divide the communities based on sowing hatred amongst the people, based on putting in differences and discriminating ideas within the people so that people don't come into proximity. And the moment people come into proximity, and especially with the Muslims, then people see another culture which is influencing them. That's exactly which happened in Tamil Nadu recently, wherein the Dalit community, they said, we want to become Muslims. They said that we don't want to be part of this hierarchy of this Varnashra Dharma, where you say the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, the four distinct categories in the society. We don't want to be under the lower caste, and we want to be liberated, and therefore we want to become Muslims. So hundreds of people just last year, just before the COVID, hundreds of people, they embraced Islam openly in Coimbatore. And in 1981, when RSS was so vehemently, it was poisoning the minds in 1981, when the RSS was about from past 100 years, they're working very strongly. Yet in 1981, an entire town called Meenakshipuram, 1981, they chose to become Muslims. The entire town, it's in Tamil Nadu. And the moment they said they want to declare their faith to Islam, there was a total attention towards that place. They were like wondering, how can this happen when we are trying so hard to keep people away? How is that the entire town is becoming Muslims? So that's the real thing that they are worried of. They are worried about something more than what we are thinking. They are worried that the entire Indian subcontinent will turn to Islam. They don't want that to happen. They don't want the influence of Islam on their people, and therefore they are sowing this hatred amongst the people by trying to keep the communities away, not getting closer to the Muslims. But that is inevitable, isn't it? When people interact in the society, they will come to know about each other. So even today, the fastest religion which is spreading in India, even today, based on all of these things, what we hear, it is Islam. Islam is the fastest growing religion, even today in India. So that is something which is not going to be promoted in the media. They are not going to portray this fact which is happening on ground in the mainstream media.
Jazakallah for that, Sister Ibtihal. And, obviously you are a barrister by profession, and we saw Sheikh Omar Sharif talk about the judicial process, and looking at obviously perceptions that are being created by the media, but also the situation on the ground reflects a different situation as far as the judicial process is concerned, and how this would actually impact on Muslims, because we know that there have been certain laws that have specifically been there that have been Islamophobic by nature. The citizenship law in India was Islamophobic by nature. When one looks at things like the hijab ban, these are laws that are Islamophobic by nature. And just looking at it from a legal challenge and looking at the judicial processes, possibly in France, and I know you've got experience in France, in the United Kingdom as well, and possibly even looking at India, where possibly certain laws, and recently we know one of the states, and we're not saying the entire India, but one of the states in particular actually banned people or women from accepting Islam by way of marriage as well. So just to try and understand how the judiciary is being used to promote or to further Islamophobia.
I think ultimately what we have to get to grips with is this idea that Islam is being attacked from every angle by particular states in power. And I think what we, from a legal point of view, it just seems that the goalposts are constantly being moved in order to fulfill a political narrative. So, by example, just as I came to France in 2002, I'd heard about a Muslim man outside of Paris, actually. His children were denied access to their educational institution, to their school, because they wore hijab. He took it to court and he actually won. And his children were readmitted. Now, a year later, the laws turned against him and his children were booted out again and he had to home teach them. Home teaching is not going to be an option for parents anymore because Macron is going to see to it that that's going to stop. So it seems that Muslims are constantly waiting for the next thing. We're all holding our breath every time there is some kind of explosion or some sort of attack, hoping that it's not a Muslim name because we know what's going to happen, that the entire community will be brought out and told to either to condemn openly, to apologize openly. And these are things that are very, very real for us as Muslims, regardless of what citizens, ordinary citizens, feel and think about Islam, that these laws are being instigated against all of us as citizens, as Muslims in the West. And that's something that can't be ignored. Now, the next thing is, how do we deal with this? Well, the first thing is we must expose these things. When they happen, we must discuss this with our neighbors. I have Jewish neighbors on one side and English neighbors on the other side. When I first came to move to a very English suburban part of Britain, no one would speak to me. I had to go around and knock on doors and speak to people. And now we discuss everything from what's going on in Israel to the elections. And we can't ignore this. We can't pretend that this is a minority of people. There is a very real Islamophobic policy going on. At the end of the day, Marine Le Pen won 10 million votes. She'll probably get more this time round. We know that Trump is still leading the world. And even though now he's been booted out, he's still got 71 million votes. And I know Joe Biden got 76. He's a man that got the most amount of votes in the whole of American history. But Donald Trump got the second largest amount of votes in the history of America. These are very real populist views and people are willing to vote for it. Where are they getting these ideas from? And ultimately, they're getting it from the media, from the state, from the elite, as Professor Tariq Ramadan. What we have to do what we've always tried to do, and that is discuss it with everybody we know and we don't know. I remember discussing the hijab ban with a taxi driver who by the end of the discussion said to me, I think I may have changed my mind. But there was in 2004, when they did a survey, they found that 75% of people were against the hijab. And that was because there was a media onslaught to make sure that happened, whereas before it was below 50%. So where did these other people come from? Who persuaded them? So we have to expose it. We have to understand that it's a very real problem. We have to get the knowledge about it. And one of the things we should expose is if we really live in a democratic society, why isn't it that they can't even put up with a piece of cloth on my head? So these are the things that we should be discussing. These are the things that we should be exposing, absolutely. And we're not the victims, although we are being victimized by the state itself. But at the same time, we are the ones that fall privy to these laws. So in Britain, by example, I'm a lawyer. I'm called a prevent lawyer. A prevent lawyer is someone. Now the state, what they can do is they can actually be, as young as 4, children can be asked questions about their beliefs. And I've had children as young as 2 asked questions by police officers who are called prevent police officers about why a child is saying Allahu Akbar or singing an anashid as young as 2. This is happening in the UK at the moment, and it's got worse so for COVID. So these and the prevent strategy itself says that our biggest threat is the Islamic ideology. When you put Islamic ideology, everyone thinks, oh, it's Islam that's the threat. And this is all coming from the state. And I'm dealing with families now who are literally losing their children because they are doing no more than practicing their deen. You might get one sensible judge who says that these people are just religious, but generally there is a policy of Islamophobia that is very institutionalized in the state. And we have to understand it, know it, and expose it. Look, my husband has been stopped at Schedule 7 so many times. Schedule 7 is you can be stopped at the border and asked whatever question. You are forced to answer it. And if you don't, you'll be arrested. When he explained this, he's a doctor, he's a medical doctor. When he explained this and he talked about it to his colleagues, They actually said to him, we're sorry that this is done in our name. But how many Muslims? There's only 2 million of us here. There's 64 million citizens. How many of us are going to be able to convince? We do what we can, but we continue to do what we can. Do it through social media, speak up. It's very, very important that we explain the wrongs of this, because now they're not just coming after Muslims, they're coming after people who are environmentalists. Anyone that dares to speak out against the government narrative, now it's people who don't want to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Anyone who speaks out will fall victim to this. It's how we deal with it, and Islam has already given us a way of doing that, and we should follow that in the way that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. And be proud that we're Muslim. I'm very proud to be a Muslimah. It doesn't bother, of course it affects me and it upsets me, but ultimately I'm proud, and I will continue to speak about it, as all of us should do.
Yes. Now, Professor Tariq, I just want to focus a bit on leadership, because when one looks at leadership right across the entire world, the leadership in France, the leadership in India, and all these leaders obviously have come under the radar for some reason or the other. And the right-wing agenda that has been playing out over a period of time, there was a time when we heard of the Red Peril, where communism was seen as a threat to the capitalist Western ideology. And with capitalism obviously having disappeared, Islam seemed to be in the spotlight. Islam came under the radar, and what is perceived to be a green peril. And when one looks at leadership right across the entire world, and they all seem to speak a common language, and when they talk about Islam, when they refer to Islam, and sadly, some of this populist ideology or these populist views that many leaders hold have actually now filtered into Muslim lands. When one looks at some of the countries around the world, and sadly to say, even in some of the Arab world, where we see this populist ideology that seems to have filtered down and being embraced even by Muslim leadership.
Yes, I think you are completely right. I really want to add my voice to what Sister Ittihal was just saying and what you are saying, because I think it's very important. It's very important, and I would say when it comes to the challenges that we are facing today, and you were talking about, fascist system, yes or no, and I say talk more about the populist ideology everywhere. Now, there is something which is important, and she was talking about this as a barrister, and we are facing legal framework. For so many years, they were telling us, you as Muslims, you are not able to abide by the law of the country, by the very essence of Islam. And we said, that's not true. We cannot abide by any unjust legal system. In South Africa, it was against Islam to support the legal system, saying that white have rights and black don't. That's not acceptable. That's the very essence of Islam, is saying no to such a legal system, because this is pure discrimination and unacceptable per se. What we are facing now, they were telling us you have right to abide by the law, and we said we don't have a problem with the law, if and only if you apply the law equally, which is not done. Now, what we are witnessing, and what our sister was just saying, Tihal is saying, is that now they are changing the law. So it's not only that they don't want to implement the law equally, they are changing the law, and now they came with the headscarf, and now they are now, for example, in France, many Muslim organizations are facing dismantling. They are dismantling organizations only because there is a suspicion that they are promoting separatism. Separatism is a very weird concept coming from China, where they are now targeting the Muslims over there because they are separatists. And separatism has to do with political Islam, with Islamism, and they don't even define any of this concept. It's just enough to say you are too much involved in politics, so you are suspicious. And then they dismantle the biggest Muslim organization against Islamophobia in France. They dismantle the biggest charity, Baraka City in France. They are targeting mosques. And in the name of a very specific way of dealing with the legal system. So they are now just promoting and normalizing discrimination. So it's true that we cannot talk about fascism and authoritarian state, but now we have to talk about security measures that are targeting the Muslims, making it less rule of law, or a state where rule of law is implemented. That's the starting point of our discussion, and we have to talk about this as citizens within our society. Now, when it comes to Islamophobia, when it comes to the reality of targeting Islam and Muslims, and as you said yesterday, we were talking about communists, and then we were, now there is a kind of an agreement that the capitalist neoliberal system is the right path. This is not disputable. We have marginal voices talking about, maybe another economy, but still the free market seems to be the reference. And what we have in Muslim majority countries is three things. It's as if today we don't talk about this. This is the way to be a progressive. It's to accept this ideology based on the free market, based on something which the free market and the way it is the westernization of the world. That's the reality of it. This is what we have to accept. And if you say, no, we don't accept this because we still think that the economy should be regulated, that we should change this capitalist view and promote human beings. And even for us, the very essence of our transcendence and Tawheed is to say, after we say Allah and after we say there is only one God, we say the precedence comes to human beings and the environment, not to money and economy. That's not the way we are dealing with it, and we are going to resist. You know why? Because by essence, Islam is saying no way. No way, we can't accept that. So this is an ideological resistance. But if you say this, you understand that you are a danger for both in the West, but also in the Muslim majority countries that are supporting the system because they are making money and they are protecting their status in the Gulf states, for example, or in dictatorships. That's the reality of it. So it's no wonder that today you have a Sisi coming from Egypt being welcome in France and as if nothing is happening over there. That's the way it is. So we, as European citizens, Indian citizens, citizens wherever we are in Europe or in the States or in the world, we have to be clear that there is a struggle which has to do with the ideological big picture, that we are resisting this westernization, neoliberal system that is imposed onto us, and we don't accept that. This is one. The second is to be able to say, you know what? There is even Islamophobia in Muslim majority countries. There is Islamophobia in Muslim majority countries. The way they are talking about Islam is to transform the image of Islam against Muslims and against the activists and against the Muslims who are promoting freedom and dignity and an open system, where we are talking about a democratic system. Speak about the democratic system if you want, but at the end of the day, the reality of freedom in Muslim majority countries, this is what we want. You know why? Because Islam is about freedom within our society. So this is the second. And third, we should understand that something which is happening now, you will see Muslim leaders, or let's say leaders of Muslim majority countries, supporting populists, supporting Trump, supporting BJP, supporting even France in their policies against the Muslims. You know why? Because they know that the Muslims who are free and who are going to be free are going to speak against them. So you better deal with the states who are controlling their citizens against your critical stance against the Muslim majority countries. So we have many fronts here. And this is where we have to be quite wise, determined, and as we said, at the end of the day, we have to be courageous. It's not easy to face the consequences of what we are saying here, because I know, for example, being an activist in the West, I have been targeted, and we are so many targeted because only we are saying, I'm a Muslim, I'm proud to be a Muslim, I will never give up being a Muslim. It means standing in the name of God for justice and humanity, whatever you say, whatever you want. This is why we have to stand. And as you know, in India, it's difficult. Everywhere in Europe it's difficult, in the States it's difficult, but this is the way forward. And I would say Muslims should not put themselves in a situation where they are the only victims. We have to make it clear. All we're talking about now, it's going to have an impact on every single citizen in the world. We are talking about the COVID, we are talking about security measures. At the end of the day, we are not all going to be under control, because the way capitalism now is spreading around is the Chinese version of capitalism, is capitalism plus security and surveillance. That's the reality for us in the future.
Well, that is obviously a stark reality, and that reality obviously is facing us, especially with COVID-19, and we've seen what has happened with regard to regulations. Now, coming back to you, Sheikh Umar Sharif, the ideological resistance that Professor Tariq Ramadan speaks of, and for someone like yourself, who is a scholar in comparative religion, and just looking at India in terms of Islam as an ideology, how Islam is perceived as an ideology, is it a threat? Is it not a threat?
That's a very profound question. Well, at this point, one of the things that we come across is to resist the false ideologies. I mean, we are talking about resisting the false ideologies and resisting something which is being imposed upon us. But along that, we need to talk about proposing an alternative. We must understand that at this point in time, we are not proposing an alternative to the society, to the political fabric of this world. I mean, as such, if you are looking at Islam, does not talk about just some of the tenets of faith and articles of faith and things connected to spirituality alone. Islam talks about even politics. Islam talks about social welfare. Islam talks about economics. So this is an alternative which has to be proposed to the people. The problem today is that we come across people talking about the Republicans and the Democrats, but where are the people who are talking about Islam as an ideology? Why isn't that there is a candidate in the USA where there is equal opportunity for anybody, whoever wants to promote his ideology and his alternative, to have his candidate contest in the elections there, while you have a person talking about Islam as an ideology, which could be seen as an alternative for what we are considering it to be inhuman in some ways. You know, if you're talking about something which is against humanity, then what is that you have to be replacing with? So that you have to consider that Muslims in general, we have to play a very strong, active politics in today's world. We must have an identity for our own self, saying that we are Muslims, yes, and we have something to share with you. Islam is not just for Muslims, it is for the whole of mankind. And the political framework, what Islam promotes, is also for the benefit of mankind. It is not going to be, talking about only the benefit of Muslims. It will talk about the benefit of humanity at large. So if we are going to talk about alcohol to be banned, is it going to be beneficial for the country or not? This is the debate that we need to put forward. If you are talking about prostitution to be banned, is it going to be beneficial or is it going to be hazardous for the society? So this kind of discussion should come on a political forum wherein the political, the notion of Islam has to be shared with the world in a very positive way. And it should have a platform, and there should be a process of elections, and Muslims have to participate. So that kind of a feeling, I can say today in India, I can say that there's so much of leadership amongst the Muslims today. Like if you hear about Barrister Asaduddin Owaisi, who is leading AIMIM, he's contesting in elections. He is having the identity politics with him. He's considering him to be a Muslim, and he doesn't bog down to any pressure. He goes and says that he's a Muslim and he wants to live as a Muslim, and the constitution gives all right and freedom for him to propose whatever his ideas are, and that is the way ahead. And I wouldn't say that we have come to a conclusion in the ideas. I would say it is in a preliminary stage, but it has to evolve. It has to evolve. The people across the world are looking for an alternative. As much as we see democracy and as much as we see communism And as much as we see Hindutva as a political ideology, we must also consider Islam also has a political ideology which is going to work for the benefit of humanity. And there are enough fatwa, there are enough rulings by the scholars that if you are having an interest to promote the Islamic values and the political idea amongst the people, then you can participate in the democratic system as well. Why isn't the Muslim community participating in the democratic system to put forward their views about what is going to be beneficial for humanity? So at this point in time, I want to say, along with resistance, we must also propose what is the alternative for today's crisis. And as much as we find the right-wing extremists working against Islam, we also have ultra-secular fanatics who also work against Islam. Anybody who is going to be extreme in his thoughts will work against Islam, including the extremists amongst the Muslims. There are extremists amongst the Muslims too. They can't, understand about pluralism. They can't, so much of problems that we come across in the world today. We must understand the victims of today's, terrorism majorly are Muslims. Muslims are the real victims of today's terrorism across the world. And we cannot deny the fact that terrorism exists. And it doesn't exist only in the Muslim community, but we cannot brush away and say that terrorism does not exist in the Muslim community. So why is that happening? Why are there certain people who are, getting deviated from the mainstream? Because they are extremists. So wherever there are extremism, wherever there is extremism, that's going to work against Islam, and Islam is going to be always giving the right direction for the people, be it Muslims or the non-Muslims. Islam is going to give the right direction of how to live in a pluralistic society. Yes, Islam talks about tolerance. Yes, let us talk about that. Islam talks about social welfare. Let us talk about how Islam gives an idea of, building an economic structure on the basis of the, the revelations which has been sent. So I want to say, we must look into the field of politics very strongly. We cannot remain as social activists. We cannot just remain to fight for our rights, but we should also try to influence in the field of legislation. So that has to be a very far-sighted effort. I feel we need to work on that.
Well, Sister Ibtial, now, just listening to what Umar Sharif is saying, and also Professor Tariq mentioned intellectual revolution. Now, this is very, very important for us to understand in terms of how do we respond, because at this point in time, we know we've got a leadership vacuum in the Muslim world to challenge the narrative and to challenge what is playing out politically and right across the entire world. And even with the latest developments in France, as Professor Tariq mentioned, Sisi visiting Egypt. But in terms of leadership, possibly we've seen Erdogan in Turkey make a few statements, and he's had this spat with Emmanuel Macron as well. But just as far as this intellectual revolution goes, and how do we as Muslims respond, to these narratives that are playing out? I know it's a loaded question.
Where do I start? But it's a very good one. Our rulers are not people we depend on to come and help us or save us in any way. We would be even surprised even if they did. They work against us. My husband is from Syria. I need not say any more than that. In fact, he left Syria very, very early on because the state was after him. And I'm from Libya. I left because of Gaddafi. Because my father, they were after my father. In fact, I understand, he only told me this after the revolution. He was given 3 days to leave, otherwise he'd be shot. So a number of Muslims have the same story. We left our countries because of our rulers. Why would we leave it otherwise? I think Libya is beautiful. I think Syria is beautiful. Tunisia is beautiful. Our lands are beautiful. The only reason we don't live there, the only reason we live here is because we can't possibly live there. Many of us are wanted. We don't have jobs. Most of the Syrians have left now at their peril. Lots of them die in their journeys. So our rulers, Sisi was described by Trump himself as my favorite dictator, and that tells you how brutal he is, This is a man who met with Macron, who put up the caricature of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and didn't say anything about it. It was a journalist that actually raised it. And Macron's answer was, we consider humanity the most important and nothing is above the honor of human beings. Apart from those human beings who happen to be Muslim, we are dishonored, we are killed, we are tortured, we're humiliated in various lands. It's very, very difficult. I agree somewhat with what my brother Omar Sharif said, in the sense that, yes, Islam is not just about prayer and Psalm and Hajj, the 5 pillars. It's much more. It was a civilization, the most successful civilization, and non-Muslims would agree with this as well, for over 1,000 years. And it started with a man that called for it in Mecca and traveled to Medina. The only place I disagree with him is we don't need to do that through a democracy. They won't put up with it anyway. If they can't put up with a hijab, then they won't be putting up with anyone saying Islam in politics. That's what they're trying to stop, incidentally. In fact, they're banning any political Islam in Austria. That's what they say. They haven't defined what that means. I don't know what that means. Probably saying, I can't go out on the road now and say and protest and say Allahu Akbar. I'd be considered a terrorist. I think we have enough land and we have enough good people to try and seek that sincere leadership back in our Muslim lands, where there is a Muslim populace, where people want Islam. We saw that really during the Arab Springs. It didn't go well. There was a lot of mess, but that's due to Western interference and perhaps a little political naivety on our part, Allahu A'lam. But effectively, we saw what people did. In Syria, they started calling for Islam. I was there during the revolution. I saw banners calling for Islam. In Egypt, they called for Morsi, and he was in power for 2 years until Hillary Clinton and Obama managed to get rid of him and put in Sisi. In Tunisia, they called for the government of Ghannouchi. People were, I remember there was a lady I spoke to, a sister I spoke to, during the votes at the time of Morsi, and she was saying that everybody she knew was just ticking boxes where there was an Islamic party. Is that really a surprise? It's not, because we're Muslims. We can see how Islam brought so much justice to us as Muslims and non-Muslims. In fact, Islam was the only civilization which people asked for them to come and take over their land in the whole of history. Now you'll see, we know that Islam left us as a political entity, but people remained Muslim. So-called freedom through George Bush came to Iraq. People didn't become secular and leave Islam. They remain Muslims. Of course, it's a mess, but we remain Muslim. The problems that we have is interference in our land. And if we want to talk about terrorism, actually, a lot of the studies would disagree with you, brother. In fact, it's a very small minority who are Muslims and commit terrorism. But we have to ask ourselves, what did foreign policy have to do with that? Why did people commit these acts of terror? When you come and bomb people and you take away their resources and you humiliate them and you treat their women like they are nothing, what are you going to get back? No one is condoning it. You shouldn't kill innocents. I almost feel like I have to give that as a disclaimer every time I talk about Islamic politics. We have a system in place. We can reignite that system. Why not? Why not? We can see the secular liberal society and its imposition on our lands has done nothing but destroy us. We want something back of our belief in our land. We want all of it back, incidentally. Why not? Why not? We have the apparatus there. We have the call for it. We have to make people understand it. And why are they banning it? Because people really on the ground, when they looked at the Arab Springs, we said, oh, let's see what they call for. Well, we didn't call for democracy and we didn't call for your liberal Western way of life. We called for Islam and they didn't like it and they came to destroy it. We need to go back to that now, really understand what it's about, get back those sincere leaders that we pick, not that are picked for us. We pick and that we can account. That's what it means when we say we have freedom in Islam. We want freedom to be able to account our rulers and remove them when they are not working in accordance to what. I'm just taking a little country I went to in 2017, Mauritania. It's got diamonds, gems, oil. It's got everything. And who is there? The French and also the Americans have built the biggest embassy I've seen, the biggest American embassy I've seen anywhere in the world. I've traveled to a number of countries in the middle of Nouakchott, which is the city. And who are the minions working for them? Mauritanians who are entitled to that wealth. We want to be able to get a leader who will give back that wealth to us so that we can live not as humiliated people, not as refugees. I'm still treated as if I'm a refugee. People still ask me if I can speak English, not as a third-class citizen, but as someone that was brought onto this land to live under Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's laws in my land, under the right leader, not the ones we have now.
Yes, Jazakallah for that. Now, I see, Professor Tariq, you had a broad smile when Sister Iftal was talking, and possibly, I'd like to know what was behind that smile.
No, I agree with almost everything I heard, even though I'm much more critical about what was called the Arab Spring. I think that we have been very naive in our assessment of what was happening. And, I by the way, I wrote a book about it, the Arab Awakening, and saying, be careful. It's not at all what we thought it was. And it was not, a conspiracy, but it was something which was much more complex than that on the global reality, and what was, the social media and the networks, the way they were used, and who, we know more today about the way it worked, and even with the US elections and Cambridge Analytica and the way Goldman Sachs was involved. So I think we have to be very cautious, even though if we come back to our discussion here, I think that all what we said and our understanding of the challenges ahead are important. And I think that Sheikh Omar was saying something which is true. It is true that when it comes to our understanding of our presence in the world today, لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ means for you to be witness to the truth before human beings and before mankind. Meaning that we have to be witnesses, and witnesses, the very meaning of witnesses is to promote what is right and to resist what is bad. Al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. This is what we are talking about. But it's a double movement, and this is why, when we speak about jihad being only resisting and effort, no. Jihad is two movements. The first one is resistance, and the second is reform. Is to resist in order to reform. It's not only to resist and that's it. It's a double movement, and this is the way we have to understand it. The very meaning of jihad, which is not, of course, we have to explain it's not holy war, but it's a double movement. It's as much a resistance than it is the promotion of what is good, an alternative. Al-Badil, it's what are you proposing to the world? What are you bringing to the world? It's important in this movement. Now, what we have is that if you look at the leadership, and this is the question you were asking, Inayet, in your question is, okay, there is a crisis in the leadership. And to tell you the truth, just let us be frank and let us be honest about it. If you look at the economic system, we are very critical towards the capitalism and the neoliberal system. Are we bringing something different? Do we have an alternative? We don't. We are very good at criticizing, but now knowing the knowledge, and we have great economists around the world, Muslim economists, but they are coming with something which is a halal system within haram, a halal transaction, or halal compliant or Sharia compliant within an ocean of haram. Because at the end, we have a desk of halal in an ocean of haram. So this is what we have. When it comes to environment, are we bringing something? Where are the Muslims bringing something about the way we look at nature, the way we understand? You are not respecting God if you don't respect nature, period. That's the reality of it. Now, do we come with something which is what is our alternative when it comes to social justice, when it comes to dealing with against racism, for example? We have everything. As you know, the essence of Islam is bringing us with all this. Are we courageous? Are we bright? Are we involved in our current discussions around the world to bring something as Muslim leaders and as the leadership that is needed today? We are not. We are not for many reasons, but I would say that I'm now becoming with becoming old, to be more humble in the way I'm looking at things. That we need today to get a sense of counter power everywhere we are. And counter power is about this double movement, is how do we come with a discourse countering the power at many levels. So it's the ideological power, it's the economic power, it's the social power. We have to resist, and we have to be. So this is bringing us something which has to do with spiritual energy. You have to resist, stand up now. When it comes, for example, about all this. And then what you have to do as a second step is, at your level, in your field, come with the second step with counter power and a sense of a proposal for the future. What can we bring on this when it comes, for example, to justice and social justice, and this is where we have to be. But I'm sorry, how come in the United States of America you have Muslims coming from the two communities? Some are Black Muslims, African American Muslims, and others are migrant Muslims. They came from Muslim majority countries, and they are very, very well educated, and they are not able to come together as something which is Muslims coming from, Black Muslims coming from migrant Muslims, and to be able to come with something which is an alternative for the United States of America. How is it that we have two conventions at the same time, Black on one side and Arabs on the others, and say, oh, this is a universal religion, we all come together, except when you are dealing with Black brothers and sisters? Is this the future? Is this the alternative? It's not. So I think that this sense that we need to have a counter culture based on our Islamic reference, promoting a sense that we have to resist ideologically and to be humble, but at the same time not to be obsessed with political power. Because today you can be a president with no authority and no power, because it's not there that you will have the power, it's elsewhere. This is what happened in Egypt. He had the authority with no power, and he had power with no authority. This is what happened to Sisi, and they played with him to the point that he was, powerless at the end. And he thought, rahimahullah, Morsi, Morsi, not Sisi, of course, Morsi, rahimahullah, and he thought that the United States of America were coming to save him. So naive on this, and this was wrong, and so many, not only him, so many Muslims around the world are not getting it. They don't get this. And I would say that, yes, we have a crisis in our leadership, and we have to be at the same time humble as to our objectives and courageous as to our stance. It's the way now we have to resist the global culture and to present ourselves as, yes, you're right, Islam is an alternative. Ideologically, it is an alternative. It's about resisting this global system based on money, discriminations, and destruction of the world. We are here in the name of our faith, in the name of the transcendent, in the name of the unique and the one God. We are here to be witness to what is right in the world. And we will be with all the people who are supporting this, Muslims or people of other faith.
Yes, we've got about 10 minutes or so to go. And Sheikh Umar, I've got a few questions, and I know there is one in particular that is directed at you, where we've got Shazia Akhtar, and she speaks about the respective governments, France and India, seeking to use and exploit the Muslim minority to push a particular policy to garner political support. But the question to you is specific, and it says, is Brother Umar speaking for all areas? Has he experience on the ground in all the areas, talking about lynchings? Is he really saying that there is negligible Islamophobia and its perception? And what about NRC and CAA?
Okay. A very powerful question, I would say. With regards to the aspect of lynchings, I would say it is very serious. Even if one person is being lynched, it's a very serious matter. And we don't consider it to be a minor issue. It's a very major issue, even if a single person is being lynched in India. And for that matter, I must also remind, it is not something which is started after BJP coming to power. That is something which people should remember, that even before the BJP came to power, we had the demolition of Babri Masjid under the government of Congress party, which happened to be a secular party, which happens to show up as a secular party. And in 1984, the Sikhs were massacred. The Sikh community were lynched. I mean, they were lynched in thousands in the middle of the roads, and people entered into their homes and they just killed the children, the old, and all of these things happened in 1984 during the Congress government. Because soon after Indira Gandhi was killed, the people showed their aggression against the Sikh community. So India, if you happen to see, 2002, we had the Gujarat carnage. So it is a consistent thing that we keep hearing. But there hasn't been something which has started afresh. It is not something which is started after the BJP coming to power. So therefore, this is existing since a long time and it is continuing, and Muslims were killed even then and Muslims are also being killed today. But the magnitude with which they were killed earlier, that was more. I can keep on quoting 2013 Muzaffarnagar, which happened, you know, the attack on the Muslims was done during the Congress being in power. And even in Assam, there were many occasions. So there's a lot of discussion we can go about. We don't say that lynching is something which is trivial. No, it's a very dangerous issue. We have to stop. But there are many reasons for that. It is, yes, of course, Islamophobia is also part of the reason. But that is not limited only to the Muslims. The Dalits are being killed. The Dalits are being lynched. Not only Dalits, even a Brahmin of a high caste, you know, religious community, from the high caste, even he gets lynched in India. And we have many occasions, very much in Uttar Pradesh, wherein Yogi Adityanath, he talks about Hindutva, and he coming from a Thakur sect, and his people have killed the Brahmins, and they have literally burned them on in the broad daylight. So all of these things are witnessed. So what I'm trying to say, let us not just separate the Muslim issue. It is a collective issue. It is not just, where is the Brahmin phobia here? When there is Islamophobia, is there a Dalit phobia that Dalits are being lynched? Is there a Brahmin phobia that Brahmins are being lynched? There is something more than Islamophobia which is working on ground. There are many reasons. There could be personal hatred. There could be personal vendetta. There could be so many reasons for what is happening on ground. But finally, what comes on the thing is that it is Islamophobia. Why? Because they want to make you feel more panicky. I don't deny the fact that there is Islamophobia, but we must not live with it as though there is a major threat. We are going to be very much in control in our lands. We are very powerful. I feel that we are very strong in our land with the current system, and we are countering the anti-Islamic forces, looking at face of it. We're not just looking, we're not showing our backs, we're looking at the face of the anti-Islamic forces and we're countering that. So that needs courage, and that needs determination, that needs a sense of positivity to say that, yes, we are going to defeat the anti-Islamic forces, the Islamophobia. So that's where I'm getting at. I'm not trying to say that Islamophobia does not exist, but there's a way to tackle this. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Right. I know we've got about 3 or 4 minutes to go to the panel, but we've just got 2 or 3 questions, and I'd appreciate it if we could just obviously just spend a few more minutes or run a few minutes over just to tackle some of these questions, because I know there are many comments that are coming through, but just specific questions. And I know we've possibly touched this one here, but Sister Ibtihal, as Muslims, and this comes from John Maplin, as Muslims, do we have to fight this ideological war individually from different parts of the world?
I don't think you could say we are individuals in an ummah. That's not, look at the panel today. We've all got different ideas about how this ideological Islam could be brought to the forefront. But we all believe that Islam is ideological. So you're not going to be working on your own when you say to people, look, Islam came as a sense of justice, in order to be a system in the world, in order for it to bring about that justice to mankind, not just as I say, to Muslims. It really does bother me that there are a lot of non-Muslims that know nothing about Islam, because we know it's the fastest growing religion, but once they see it on a state level, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Nasr, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحُ وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. When you see the victory of Allah, people will come into Islam in droves, and we saw that when Medina happened. So I don't think you can say I work as an individual. You will be working alongside people that will be like-minded. Most people, there were very, very few, I would have thought, would say that yes, I believe that Islam should have a state apparatus. It should be a system that comes to the forefront of the world, as it has done in the past, and it can come again. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it would. But it's how we do that, and that's where the knowledge really has to be accrued. And it is really sitting down and reading about this. A lot of us are now into just clicking for the answer, but we really have to go out and get that information, see who is working for it, see if there are people working for it. See if you're convinced by what they do, and if you are, I mean, as a Muslimah, as a humble Muslimah, I see it incumbent upon myself as part of that person who calls to the khair and removes that which is shar, to speak about this in social media. Look, I'm on a channel today. People will be watching. Maybe they'll be convinced by something. Maybe they'll want to debate something I've said. But you use what you have, and with the turbocharge we see of social media, every Muslim has a voice, and you are one of many. So inshallah, it's not an individual case, because we're talking about bringing Islam back in a state level for all of the ummah and beyond. So inshallah, but go and read about it, find out what it means. Because unfortunately, a lot of us just stick our head in the sand, don't want to understand that there is Islamophobia, don't want to understand that we do have to have a voice, don't want to understand that it is incumbent upon us as Muslims, as a fard, for us to stand for the deen, not to defend it. The truth doesn't need defending, but to stand for it, to accept it as the truth, and to propagate that truth to everybody. And if we all did that, where would we? Well, more of us did that. I'm not expecting 1.8 billion. It would be nice, but imagine we're a quarter of the world, and if a lot of us did that, then where would Islam be today? I mean, a few of us do it now, and the states are chasing us. They're worried. They're concerned. They don't want political Islam. If only they knew the justice of it. And I'm talking about their citizens. They want their power to be in place. I'm talking the politicians. But if only ordinary citizens knew the beauty of this deen, how many of them would really reject it? But many of them would want to see it on a state level. And that's what we need to see. We need to see, look, if these rulers at the moment are running the state in the idiocy, in the way that they are, the idiotic way that they are, and the dangerous way that they are, I'm sure that we could have an Islamic ruler who would run it much, much better. And it's altogether possible. Not because I say so, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said so. So let's have that vision.
Well, certainly. And I think what we're going to do, I've seen there are many comments that have obviously been coming through. The key issue now is, as we wind down, and Professor Tariq, just your final thoughts and concluding remarks. We are running over a bit, and we need to apologize for that, but possibly about 2 minutes, and just to sum up what we've been talking about.
No, I don't want to take too much of the time that we have. I think everything has been said. The last words of Sister Ibtihal are important. I would say that, as it was said, it starts with us. It starts with us. Yes, we are not. There is no individual. We are part of a community, but we know that before God, we have to answer the call, and we have to stand up. And we are on our own, but we are never alone. So that's something which is essential in our understanding of our involvement. And I would say something, and my last comment. When you live in a country and you are dealing with what is happening around the world, I would say don't ask an Egyptian to speak about the Egyptian authoritarian regime while they are there and when they have their family there. That's very dangerous, because you know how the leaders and the rulers could go against them and their family. So I would say I can understand what is happening and what is said about India, but from where I am, I'm not living in India. And what we know about India, yes, there are things that are happening in India that are unacceptable. The way the lynching is there, Muslims are targeted, not in all the cities, but what is happening today in India is unacceptable. And Muslims, but not only citizens and human beings around the world should say this. Even though we have our brothers saying things are moving and it's not as bad as it is, what we know, the figures and the current policy of this populist party in office today in India makes it unacceptable, and we have to say it. And if it's not for, we have to take this as a lesson. Don't speak for your country only, speak for other countries. And this is also the way you protect your brothers and sisters living in a specific country when you talk about what is happening in Egypt or in India or elsewhere around the world. And let us spread this as a philosophy of life. Whatever you do, wherever you live, there is only one thing that you need to know. In the name of your faith, you can't give up and you can't be silent. You have to be the voice of the voiceless wherever you live, inshallah.
Inshallah. Sheikh Umar, final thoughts?
Well, it was really a great interaction with intellectuals here, including yourself and Barrister Ibtihal and, of course, Professor Tariq Ramadan. It's very beneficial. It's nice. It's a lot of storming of thoughts and ideas, and we get to learn so many things. What I'm looking at is the last final thought I want to leave you with is that democracy, it had a beginning in Greece. And from there, it has moved all the way up until we find it in India, the land of India. We have democracy today, ever since 1947. After that, we have had. And democracy is left to play. People are playing with democracy as they want, like how a child wants to play with it. Each one is interpreting democracy in his own way. And at the end of it, democracy lets you to choose the leader. And what is really problematic is, do we adopt secular values or do we adopt Islamic values? Can Islamic influence be seen within the democratic system to establish the Islamic values in your land? So that's where the debate has to be in future. And we need to have a lot of discussion on that to understand this concept. And I thank all of you for having participated and giving a lot of thoughts from your side.
Well, Jazakallah for that. And Sister Ibtihal, I think most of us who are married will know this. The woman always has the last word.
I think my husband would agree. Alhamdulillah. Barakallah feek, brother. It's been an honor, really. I think the last message I'd leave is really to Islam gave an inspiration to the whole world, and it should inspire us every day. Today I woke up this morning and I read the headlines about this and that and the other, and my husband said to me, the world has gone mad. And I think non-Muslims would agree, and Muslims, everybody would agree. So there has to be an alternative. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this universe. He can create a political system that acts as a very real alternative to what we have at the moment. And what we have has turned the whole world mad. Let's ensure that that begins to turn right now, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Well, to you, Sister Ibtihal Basiz, and also Professor Tariq Ramadan, Sheikh Umar Sharif, Jazakallah. We thank you for coming on and being part of the panel of the discussion that we've had in the last hour and a half or so. And we certainly do appreciate your time with us here on Salam Media. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Well, that brings us to the end of this special broadcast that brought to you by Salam Media this evening, looking at fascism and how it has manifested itself, looking at countries like India and France in particular, but also taking the discussion globally. I must say it was a fascinating discussion. It was wonderful being with you, and also the team here at Salam Media who had put this entire program together, Mohammed Arai, with Shazia Zubair, our station, our head here, our boss out here, Porti Molasani, who's been out here this evening, making sure that everything goes well, and also Sadiq behind the controls. We thank you for listening, for watching, for viewing this evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.